Hi, and welcome back to ADK Talks, the podcast that explores the people, places, and stories that make the Adirondacks one of the most fascinating regions in America. I'm your host, Jane, along with my brother, Steve. Say hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
And today we're shining a light on a remarkable chapter of history that runs right through our mountains and valleys, the Underground Railroad. Joining Steve and I today is Jackie Madison, president of the North Country Underground Historical Association.
Underground Railroad Historical Association.
Okay, great. The Underground Railroad Historical Association. Thank you. Her organization operates North Star Underground Railroad Museum, located just steps away from Ausable Chasm. And it's really where history and natural beauty meet. And I'm actually here with Jackie today at the museum on a beautiful crystal blue sky day, and we're thrilled to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me and our museum on this podcast. I am certainly looking forward to sharing.
Why were the Adirondacks in this route? So what made that unique? Is it that people were coming up from New York City and up the Hudson, or how did
Some may have come up. The route wasn't a very straight route. Okay, like I would come into New York City, then come up to Albany, right, and then just
get on the Amtrak,
right, because they still had to elude the slave catchers, and they could, of course, go anywhere. And so typically the route could end up that you might have a few that came straight up, but it was sort of a wavy process.
Mm-hmm.
You might have individuals that went over into Vermont for a while, and then they stayed there, and then they may have been routed up, coming back through Rouse's Point into New York, and then maybe going over to Ogdensburg, and then going up into Canada. So it wasn't a very clear route. It was really dictated by what was happening at the time, whether there were slave catchers here or not, whether there were people here that might turn them in. So, but it was a very good network of getting people to the next route. Yeah.
Were there any particular communities in the Adirondacks that stand out as being helpful?
Probably Keysville and Peru. Yes.
Okay.
Keysville, and there's a gentleman there on that portrait, is Wendell Lansing. Wendell Lansing was the newspaper editor in Keysville. Now, his grandfather did have slaves, but he was vehemently anti-slavery, and he would use his newspaper to actually call out individuals that had slaves. He was so against slavery that his home was really a depot for abolitionist individuals as well as for African American men. But he got so upset, he tried to get his Baptist church. He was a Baptist, he was not a Quaker, that it sort of broke the church up for a little bit, and they closed for a while. But he wanted the minister to not allow people with slaves to be a part of that church. Of course, that did not happen. But he got so anti-slavery that he was run out of town for 6 years.
Wow.
However, when he does return, he goes into the Civil War. He actually ends up being loved, not so much for his anti-slavery movement, but for what he had done, with the newspaper in the region. So he has a rather impressive tombstone in the Evergreen Cemetery.
Wow. That's fascinating. The name of the museum is the North Star.
Right.
What's the significance of that?
Typically, you think of the North Star as the leader to sort of help guide, direct people northward. They said that could also be used, moss on trees that grew on the north side. That was another indicator that you were moving north. There are those who think there is a road in Moores, if I'm not mistaken, called the North Star. And there's a belief, but we've not found any definitive proof or documentation to support it, that it was sort of named as a result of that.
And your logo has a lantern on it. What's the
Yes.
significance of that?
It's a light.
The
It's
light.
a light. Yeah, it's sort of a guide to freedom.
Yep. That's great. Can you, I'd love for you to describe it. I could certainly do it, but for our listeners who have never been here before, what can they expect when they walk into the museum?
When you walk into the museum, of course, you enter where our docents would be seated, and you sort of have a small gift shop that's on your right. But one of the things before you actually get physically into it, when you close the door to your right, is a timeline that talks about when slaves first came to New York all the way down to 1870 with the 15th Amendment that gave African American men the right to vote. And then we do have displays. We have sort of a welcome sign in the museum for our visitors. But we also have an exhibit to the first owners of this home, which was Herbert and Harriet Estes. Now, the house, and we get this question all the time, was it part of the Underground Railroad? To our knowledge, it was not. But Herbert Estes was in the Civil War, and he actually was captured in Salisbury, North Carolina, and they had a very notorious Confederate prison there. Typically, men did not survive to make it out, but he did. But during his stay, he kept a diary. And when he returned, he was asked by Congress to actually come down and talk about his experience at that prison. He ended up reading the entire diary. So if you want to ever know what it was like, you can go online because it's part of congressional records.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yes. So, which was good because his family had the diary up until about 7 years ago, 8 years, and then they lost it. So they thought it was totally lost. So now having it
in the congressional record, that's amazing.
And then coming in, we have exhibits of the maps in the main room as well. Off of the main room is a door that leads into the John Thomas room, which is perhaps our most popular exhibit. It's an object theater. It talks about a formerly enslaved individual, John Thomas, who actually escapes when his first wife and children were sold. He makes his way with two others formerly enslaved individuals up into Philadelphia, and then they are routed into Albany, Troy. And then in Albany, Troy, he meets Garrett Smith, who was an abolitionist that lived in Peterborough, which is about 45 minutes south of Syracuse. Garrett Smith was a wealthy, quite wealthy.
He's very wealthy, yeah.
He owned over 800,000 acres of land. Some he acquired from his father, who was in the Revolutionary War, but some he was buying as well. But Garrett Smith had this vision if he could give land, because African American men needed land valued at $250 to vote. If he could get enough African American men here and they could vote slavery away. But what he failed to do, he did give 3,000 African American men 40 acres of land, but he didn't really take in consideration that many of these men did not know how to farm. They were from the city. They also did not have the resources or the funding for the resources. They didn't have the livestock. They didn't have the tools to farm. And in many cases, they didn't know how to use those tools to farm.
And where was that? In the Champlain Valley, or
it was in North Elbow, which is just outside Lake Placid.
Okay,
that was probably
where the John Brown farm is.
Right, that was perhaps his biggest settlement. He also had a settlement called Blacksville up near the Malone area. That did not fare very well. It lasted about 5 years or so.
Wow.
And one of the other pieces is that John Brown came to the area as a result of Garrett Smith giving this land to help these farmers. But John Brown was always gone. And then, so, I mean, he did do things when he was here. I know I came across an account where in Blacksville, he got food to that town. But you have to be here and you have to sort of show them how to farm. And some of the land that Garrett Smith gave individuals also very rocky.
Yes.
So it didn't grow. You couldn't grow very well on that. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's not the farming capital of the Adirondack.
No.
So, okay,
it wasn't.
Maybe well-intentioned and a great idea, but it's all in the execution.
Right. And the execution was sort of haphazard, I think.
Right.
I mean, the big idea is to get the land. You do need that. But there were a lot of other steps that needed to go along with that. And John Thomas he was successful. He actually acquired 50 acres of land. No, 40 acres, I'm sorry, of land from Garrett Smith. But those 40 acres, it was too far from church because when he was in Albany, Troy, he met his second wife, Mary, and they had children. And that land was too far from church, too far from the school, so he sold it. And he went back to Troy, but he really must have missed the area because he would return and he would purchase a farm in Bloomingdale, 50 acres.
Okay.
And he would ultimately grow that to 200 acres. Now, he was illiterate, according to the census, but he did thank Garrett Smith. He had a letter written to Garrett Smith that was discovered in an attic in a home in Syracuse, in which he thanks him for everything he had done for his family.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite artifact or something that always sparks conversation in the museum?
Yes, there is. In the church room, we had a visitor who came to our museum in 2015. And he said he was so impressed that he wanted to do something to sort of showcase freedom. And what he did was he lives half time in Keysville, half time in New York City. Zaplinski, I think, is his name. It's a Polish name, so I don't want to.
You want to make sure you pronounce it the best you can. Yeah, exactly. No, I get that.
And there's a follow-up to it, so I definitely got to do this. And you'll see it's a man. Well, it's a complete man with parts missing. He worked with an Italian sculptor, and he has these widgets, and he has put this the sculpture together.
It's life-size.
It's life-size, yes. And you'll see one of his arms, I think it's the right arm, is raised with the fist. That sculpture is called Germinal, and it is a tribute to the human spirit for freedom.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen it.
Yes, and the follow-up to that is that a week ago, we had students to come up from Tuxedo Park, which is near New York City.
Yeah.
And his grandson, Matthew, was in the class, the ninth grade class, and he was so elated because he wanted to see his grandfather's sculpture.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so
I like that. That's so cool.
Neat.
That was very cool. I did not expect that at all.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It's very, let's talk a little bit about the church room because I found that to be very, very interesting.
The church room was composed of 4 of the 5 churches. Well, I should say one's a meeting house in the area at the time. There was the Presbyterian, the Baptist, the Methodist, and the Quakers had the meeting house, but there was a Catholic church here as well. The churches, their members, and even some of their ministers was depending on who was residing at the time, sort of a split. The Quakers, on the other hand, had come to the conclusion that slavery was not right, that it went against God's law. And so they were fully on board that if you had slaves and you were a Quaker, they removed you from their meeting house until you no longer had them. So, and that's because they felt that God had in each person a light, and that was no matter what their race was. And so that was very important, and we had to respect that.
That's great. One of the things that really struck me about that exhibit as well is these weren't big communities, but how deeply divided they were on slavery. And how I can't, at a time right now in our country where there's a lot of division, I can only imagine what that must have been like. And really, you think of the Civil War and brother against brother, but even here in the North Country, how divided it was as well.
It was very divided. There was another gentleman in Peru, Stephen Key Smith, and his farm still exists today. And he was a Quaker, and he was one of the abolitionists that was helping people get to freedom. Well, there was a Methodist minister that lived near here that suspected Stephen Key Smith of actually helping runaways, and he threatened to turn him in. What he did not know was that Stephen Key Smith was actually friends with the sheriff at the time. And so whenever the Methodist minister would say, you need to tell the sheriff that he was hiding people, the sheriff would say, well, I got to come down to your place. He would tell Stephen that. And so, of course, nobody's going to be there by then.
Right.
So he never really got caught. So it was quite divided. And what we are hearing with some visitors talking and coming today is that they feel in some ways we're kind of reliving that era with immigrants being, deported,
Yeah, definitely. When I first arrived today, you were talking about the events in Plattsburgh this weekend. You do a lot of stuff in terms of like outreach in the community as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, this weekend was the Battle of Plattsburgh. It sort of showcases this region's involvement in helping America get freedom, in a sense. The big battle that occurred in this area was in 1814, and it was actually up on Route 22 in Beekman Town. And so each year they sort of showcase, provide the history. It's typically a very long weekend. It may start late Thursday into Friday, and they have a parade. They have activities, a variety of activities, even for children. Of course, the food is always there. They do reenactments of what was happening with the war at that time. This year, they actually did a showing of the War of 1812 at the Regal Theater.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a variety of things to sort of highlight and showcase and tell the story of the history of the war at that time.
Yeah.
Now, we do that, but one of our other big items is the Juneteenth celebration, since that became a holiday in 4 years ago, about 21. And we worked with Clinton County Historical Association, their museum. We worked with SUNY Plattsburgh. Maybe this year we'll also include Clinton Community College. We worked with Paul Smith's College. So we work with a variety, John Brown Farm, and we've had in the past a day of activities, usually on a Saturday. We do what we call the historical piece with our museum, where we would do a bus tour, go around and show some of the sites that were part of the Underground Railroad. And then we end up at Stephen Key Smith Farm because the hidden room is still in the barn.
Wow.
You can go in. And we have Neil Burdick, who is Stephen Key Smith's great-great-grandson. And he does a reenactment with his wife, Barbara. He plays Stephen Key Smith, and his wife plays Catherine Keyes, who is actually his aunt. Catherine Keyes was a very, what I call Renaissance lady. She was Samuel Keyes' second wife. His first wife passed away. And when she came, she was a teacher in Philadelphia and a minister. She was actually the first female minister at what we call now the Dannemora prison.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So, and she traveled around. She also opened up her home for school for girls. The Quakers did educate their girls as well as their boys. And on the Halleck Hill, you have the Quaker cemetery today, but that was also a Quaker, thriving Quaker Union community. They had businesses, they had schools, they had one, the girls was on one floor, the boys on the second floor. They had their meeting houses. And of course, you think that they would be very cordial and not have any disputes in religion. They did. And they broke into two different, the traditional Quakers and then the Hicksite Quakers. But eventually that went away and they came back together. But so it was this thriving area that was there.
Wow, that's really cool.
We start with the history here for the Juneteenth, but then we would go down to the John Brown farm, and we have a gentleman, Richard, who would also give John Brown's last speech.
Oh, wow.
And he's very good at it. You almost think you're hearing John Brown, but he doesn't have the long beard. And and then that's sort of the fun part. We did a Juneteenth celebration, sort of talk about Juneteenth. We did a Jeopardy game show. We had the People's Choir. One year we had Dexter, a choir from the SUNY Plattsburgh, and he actually sang songs and gave the history of those songs. So
Oh, wow.
it's sort of a fun, it's a historical morning, and then in the afternoon, the fun. There's a food truck for barbecue. So, yes.
That's great. That's awesome. You know, how you're not for profit. So how are you funded? Is it through donations? Do you get grants? Are you finding that sort of with all the cuts in federal programs for museums a difficult time?
Actually, we've never really gotten a federal grant.
Oh, wow.
So, that's sort of a blessing in disguise. We've actually been funded through membership as well as donations. We've gotten smaller grants from other places, or we've gotten some to help with the Juneteenth programming and other variety of things. We've also had fundraiser that has brought in money. I can say with what's happening today with many of my peers losing their federal funding, I think for us, we've actually had some people just donate money just because.
Okay.
And not just the 20 or 25, a few hundred. I think in one case, we had someone donate over 2,000. So, but we are still in the process. And we do ask if you're interested in supporting us, that you provide a donation, because we're in this beautiful stone building, but it has to be maintained.
Right.
And although we do encourage people to donate, if they don't have the funds when they come to visit, we're not going to say we can't let you in, because we want to make sure we share this information with people. And we ask for a $5 donation a person or $10 for a family, not specifying a family size.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are interested in supporting and maintaining this history, which I think is really unique and positive, which you typically don't get a lot of times, I would encourage you to donate. And we welcome whether it's $1 or $1,000. We are certainly open to it.
Yeah.
If someone would like to donate, could they go to your website and donate? What is your website?
Yeah, you can go to our website, and our website is the North Country Underground Railroad.com. And there is a place on there that you can make a donation. And we do send out traditional thank you letters. I want to mention that too, because I know that's something that doesn't go out too often unless you make a few 100,000. But the reason I'm saying that is that we've been here now for about 13, 14 years. And of course, things break down, and we're having to replace our HVAC system as one of those things.
Wow.
And we do need to do some more renovations. The windows need to be done. These are the original windows. And there are some other things that need to be done here.
Yeah. And it's on our way up here in this conference room that we're in on the second floor. It's the upstairs is still very much a house.
Yeah.
And so you get a sense of what it must have been like to live here as well. It's a beautiful building. It's really beautiful. What about volunteer opportunities?
We are always seeking volunteers. We're sort of like heading towards the end of our season, open season, which runs from Memorial Weekend to Columbus/Indigenous Day in October. But even when we're closed, we have activities that we can do. We have a lot of archival materials that's available that we need to get into our archives. And we would like to have planning. So if you're interested in doing exhibits or if you're interested in doing programs, we would certainly love to have you be a part of that. And I should say our fundraising committee this year is having a pie sampling activity. And that will be on that Sunday before Indigenous Columbus Day. So we'll encourage you to come out to sample pies that we're getting from a variety of places. So if you're a pie lover, please.
That's great.
See us.
I love that idea.
That is awesome.
We're doing an organization I volunteer for. Where our annual benefit is a wine tasting, but now as so many people aren't drinking, it's sort of like we have to sort of rethink what the branding is for that event. I'm going to say to them, like, let's do a pie tasting next year instead of a wine tasting. So that's really interesting. I know you're at the end of the season, but what are you looking forward to or things that are coming up in the future?
Well, we started to plan for our Juneteenth as a big one. We would like to do a little bit more for Black History Month. One of the things that I've really thought about doing was sort of an open discussion in light of everything that's happening with our country today. To sort of have an open discussion about, do you think we're entering an Underground Railroad period again?
That's really interesting. It's one of the things you mentioned when we started, one of the ahas for me when I came here, beyond just not even knowing, having grown up in the Northeast and in New York State, the role that the Adirondacks played in the Underground Railroad, but the reverse Underground Railroad of Chinese immigrants coming from Canada and using that pathway to get into the U.S. because they could get work on the railroads, and west of here as well. And it's sort of interesting. We're in interesting times when those conversations are coming up again about immigration and how people are traveling.
Yes. And in fact, we have the story of Bak-Ying Chen. The display that we have is actually a display on loan from the Port Henry Historian Society. We got that display, and shortly afterwards, an Amy Chen, who was with the Chinese Museum in New York City, happened to come up. And the book that's in that display is actually a police logbook. Almost ended up in the trash. There are two books that the Peru historian has. In that book, Amy Chen actually discovered her grandfather, Bak-Ying Chen.
Oh, wow.
And so what she did was she digitized both of those books and put them online. And I think when we last heard from her, there were several individuals that had discovered relatives. The book contains information on each of the individuals that came through, because what was happening prior to those books coming into display was that when the individuals was coming across, Bak-Ying Chen, for example, his father and mother were in America. He was working on the railroads, his father. And when they went back to China, but he was born in California. When he was older, he came back from the west of Canada, across, and came down from Quebec into Rouse's Point and was apprehended. Now, they built a jail in Port Henry, so by the time he came down, he ended up in the Port Henry jail for these Chinese immigrants that were coming in. But prior to that, they were actually being jailed in the prisons throughout the towns, and those prisons were filling up, which is why they built this jail just to house immigrants. It no longer exists, but they know where it was. And Ba King Chen ended up in that jail. Now, they had to prove that they were citizens or they would be returned to China. And he was able to prove that he was born in California.
Wow.
So he stayed and he went down to New York City and opened a laundromat.
Wow. That's incredible. What's your hope when people come to this museum? What would you like for them to take away?
I would like for them to take away, perhaps, and I think I did tell this to someone, to actually look at people as people, not so much as you're from Africa or you're from Europe, that we are all the same when it comes to, we all want our freedom. We all want to be safe. We all want to think that we're in a place that's secure, that we don't have to do a lot of worrying. And I think when people come here, we want them to recognize that we're all human, and we're seeking to be sort of like that Germinal. We have this spirit of humanity that we want to share with everyone, not with just, this is my group or this is my group.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. Jackie, the day that I visited here, kind of had the place to ourselves for most of the time. Somebody was just leaving when we came in and other people, but we spent a lot of time talking to the docents, and they really impressed me, not only with their knowledge, but we just wound up having probably a 20-minute conversation with them after we'd been through the museum. How do you prepare to be a docent here? What kind of training? They really made the experience excellent.
It's an on-the-job type of activity. I will say that initially, but we do have we have like a docent's manual, so that they will have something to guide them as they're going through the day. And we have a docent drawer in which it contains information on the Underground Railroads that they can read, their books, their articles, so they can sort of educate themselves about the Underground Railroad. During the day when they're here, they can also borrow those books and take them home with them.
Yeah. They're really a great part of the experience.
The docents are really, and I have to say, they are the heart of the museum, because they are the first ones that are interacting with our visitors, and those visitors take away their impression of what they think of our museum as a result of that interaction. And it's not just a one-way thing. And when I say that, the docents aren't here and they know everything and that about the Underground Railroad. It turns out it's a two-way process. We have visitors that come in and share information that we don't know. One of the things that we learned from a couple that came in, and this was the gentleman that worked at Fort Drum, he was doing construction, relayed that Fort Drum was a plantation and there is a nanny buried there. So, and that was true. So we're sort of learning stories from our visitors as they are learning from us. So the docents are the heart of our museum.
That's really wonderful. We actually talked about the Underground Railroad Museum, your museum, on another episode of our podcast a few weeks ago, when we were pointing out great things to do this fall if you're here. And what a great, I like to call them pocket museums, right? It's not like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Museum of Natural History where you go and spend hours. You can get a lot and of information and history and knowledge at many of these museums in the Adirondacks in 45 minutes or an hour. And when you were talking about the docents, I think about other places I've been, like the Laboratory Museum in Saranac Lake, where the person who was behind the desk wasn't just, taking tickets and selling the postcards. They had so much information to share. So I really encourage folks, whether you're, I had the same experience as a little bit bigger scale at the Adirondack Museum on Blue Mountain Lake, the Adirondack Experience. You just talk to the people that are probably volunteering there, and they have so much to share and such great knowledge.
Yes, and one of the other things I'd say is you mentioned the volunteers. We're not staffed. We're all volunteer. And so that's spectacular. So you're talking to people who really are dedicated to this.
They want to be there.
Yes, and wanting to share this information. So you're right. I would encourage them to visit all of these museums. And although we have the open season from Memorial to Columbus/Indigenous Day, we are available for tours even during our closed season. We just ask that you email us, and our email is ugr@frontier.com.
This has been such a great conversation, Jackie. I, as I said before, I have been, but I learned a lot more today too. So thank you so much for making time for us. We like to end every episode. We call it our hidden gem question. And we encourage people to ask docent questions around their museums. Another great question to ask people is, what's your favorite place in the Adirondacks? And that's what we like to do with our guests. Sort of tell us, if you had a family or friends visiting for the first time, what's a place that you would either tell them they have to go visit or you might take them to? And it can be anything. It can be an ice cream stand. It can be a hiking trail. It can be a place to ski or snowshoe. It can be another museum. You can't say the Underground Railroad Museum. I'm sorry. But, what's one of your favorite places?
Perhaps one of my favorite places, and I have a lot, I think it's more driving. But if I was to really think about it, it would probably be down around Lake Champlain, Lake Placid area. And it's that wonderful drive going up the side of the mountain. And that's one of them, because you get to see this beautiful scenery. But the other one is going across the bridge in Rouse's Point to Vermont, where you can see both sides of the country. I mean, those are spectacular sights. And I don't know, it's just the beauty of it. And you live in this area that is just so spectacular.
Yeah, definitely. And Steve, you're good on navigation. Put Rouse's Point in people's mind map.
If you look at a map of the state of New York, Rouse's Point is just about as far north as you can go on Lake Champlain.
Okay.
It's it's probably the furthest east and north part of the state.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it. And I love that too. Steve's son lives in Burlington. And so to be able, I think sometimes the best view of the Adirondacks is from Vermont, on the other side of Lake Champlain. But it is, this part of the Adirondacks is not the most well-traveled, like Placid, Lake George, or people, often those towns and places come to mind. But this Champlain Valley area is stunning.
It is stunning. And you can go there like even from taking Route 9, when you go out here and make your right, at the very top, you get to see the lake. And it's just, I mean, the scenery is, I don't know if, maybe I'm just sort of enthralled because I took a trip across the country. But it's just the scenery. It's just like magnificent. You're like, wow, how did they make this?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, I don't know, it's just breathtaking.
We had a guest on earlier this year, and she said the exact same thing. She said she cries. She especially in the fall when the colors are out and it's a sunny day and you hit Lake Champlain and you see all of that, it brought tears to her eyes. She's just said it was so beautiful.
It is. It's beautiful. It's just amazing. And we have this access to this. And the other thing I'll throw in here, but it's not, man, so much as we get a lot of Asians that'll come in during the peak season. And I'll never forget, this lady came and we had all these leaves out here, and she was rolling around me. I was like, oh my gosh, don't you know there are insects there? But they don't have this in China where she was from.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think the wonders that are here, the beauty is just spectacular.
We're so lucky. We're so lucky. And we're so lucky to talk to you today, too, Jackie. We really appreciate you taking time with us.
This is fun. I really like anytime I can share these stories. I must say, you do get to appreciate the people that came before you when you learn the history.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I really like. And I think when you appreciate them, you really should share what they have done.
Yeah. Agreed. Listener, we hope you have enjoyed today's episode.
I have.
That's great. And thank you for tuning in to ADK Talks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover not only our show, but also how to find out about the best things to do and places to visit in the Adirondack Park, like the Underground Railroad Museum. For more exclusive Adirondack content and local insights, visit adktaste.com. And as long as you're there, sign up for our newsletter so you never miss an update. Until next time, keep exploring and enjoying the fabulous Adirondacks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Steve.